First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down a very interesting card we have over in Brazil. We've got the return of the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, going to take on the young heavyweight sensation in Jailton Almeida. Going to help break it down with Lou Finocchiaro standing by, Jordan Sherwood, Dan Vreeland, and Kuhn. Since we last spoke, the UFC has been off for a week, but boy, a lot of changes in the fight game overall. UFC 295, Jon Jones is out. The fight with Stipe Miocic is off. So we have a new interim heavyweight championship. That'll be Tom Aspinall is going to take on Sergey Pavlovich. That'll be on the undercard, the main card rather, as a co-main event for UFC 295. So we'll figure out if we've seen Jon Jones, the last of them in the octagon. Will he be back later on in 2024? We will find out about all those twists and turns. Without further ado, let's meet and bring on the man, Lou Finocchiaro. You can follow him on Twitter as I do, or X as the kids call it today, at GamLou, the host of the About Business podcast. Lou Finocchiaro, woo! Lou, we had a week off, and all hell broke loose in the heavyweight division in the UFC. What do you make of Pavlovich and Aspinall? We'll break it down next week here with the rest of the crew. But the fact that Jones and Stipe is off, do you think we'll see that fight in 2024, and do you want to see it?
Well, first of all, Dave, thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, a lot of developments happening. I don't think anyone would argue that after Jones and Miocic fought and left their gloves in the cage, that this was going to be the fight for the title anyway. I can't predict if they'll fight. I don't know how they'll fight. I don't think Stipe has the time. And Jones has a pectoral muscle isn't anything silly. So, I can't tell if they'll fight or not. I would say, and I would bet that they don't. I would think things move on without him. Aspinall shows heart, grit, guts. I'm not sure how much IQ stepping in on short notice.
We're going to break down that fight again. That is a huge development right now in the heavyweight division. Maybe a future champion we're going to see on this card this week in Jailton Almeida, a guy used to be light heavyweight, moving up to heavyweight, and really so far so good for Almeida. Is going to take on a guy that's been there, done that, been in there with the best, and Derrick Lewis in the Black Beast here. Before we break down this main event here, you have some observations on just the overall card and maybe some ways from a betting angle to attack it, because this is what the UFC does. When we're in Brazil, you're going to see a lot of Brazilians on the card.
We are. When we see fights from London, we see London fighters in some occasions get favorable matchups. We were just in Abu Dhabi last week and only 2 underdogs hit, one outsider. So when we look at this card, 13 fights, 13 Brazil versus somebody from another part of the world. 9 of the 13 fights have Brazilians as favorites, pretty good favorites. And most of those favorites, interestingly enough, opened higher than they sit right now, meaning money has come in on almost every occasion against the heavily favored chalky Brazilians. So it should be very, very interesting to see what happens. But I think you have to begin with the canvas painted to some degree that there's going to be a pro-Brazilian taint after the UFC wants to return to Brazil, continue its massive exportation of its product in the heartland of its sport, Brazil. And I think you're going to have to weed through to find which of the Brazilians may not have such a favorable matchup and which of the outsiders may have an advantage either as an underdog or a slight favorite. To me, that might come more on the undercard, Dave.
And again, we're going to get to some of those picks that you have. And I know that you've already put some releases out there in the About Business podcast. But in this main event, when you look at Derrick Lewis, and I mean, when this fight was announced, I went, oh no, like, Derrick, you want to fight this kid when we know that the last thing you want to do is have the fight hit the ground. So again, the handicapping here, Almeida, $5 betting favorite. The comeback right now in the Black Beast is plus 380. Is there any other way than to play this if you want to back the dog side, Derrick Lewis via KO? Because I just can't see any possible way that this hits 5-round decision and Derrick Lewis could win it.
Yeah, I don't think I read it like you. do, Dave. I see the 1.5, the unders minus 350. Maybe you try and maybe if you feel the beast is up for it, maybe you see if the fight will start round 2 when those props come out. But let's just consider this: Almeida is 231, 232 when he hits the cage. The beast struggles, has to cut weight to make 266.
Wow.
And he's aware that his weakness is on the ground. So if there's a path for the beast, it's to by all means keep the fight standing and keep Almeida off him. Now, when he does that, he creates another issue, and that is that Almeida is smaller, faster, quicker, younger, and he could cut him to ribbons from the outside. I don't know if the beast will be able to catch up to him on the feet. But if you're looking for angles to try and squeeze some value out of this fight, that may be it, to see if the beast can make it to round 2.
Yeah, there you go. Plus money if you think he can get over a round and a half at plus 275. And the books they're always sharp, right? And you really don't get that big of a discount by taking Derrick Lewis to win via KO, TK, or DQ. It's just 4-1, and right now he's plus 370. So they've even tightened up those numbers there for any other possible pathway. That being said, it can get dicey for method of victory. If we want to back the big favorite here, you don't want to lay that $5 price tag here. KO, TK, or DQ is plus $1.60. Sub for Almeida, which is a very plausible scenario if he gets Derrick Lewis down to the ground, is minus 110. For the fight, just inside the distance, is that the way you'd look at Almeida, to shorten it ever so slightly?
Dave, I think in this situation, I'd get bold and go to the submission. Just because I do believe he gets him down, and once he gets him down, he's going to just crawl all over the top of him and choke him or armbar him some way. I mean, let's understand, if Derrick Lewis is able to keep it 3-4 minutes, even into the second round, he'll gas. He doesn't have a lot of energy after that. And for a large man, he's quite explosive. And when he tries, and he will try, he's there to win. He's going to try and catch up to Almeida, but it's going to cost him energy. And I believe it's eventually going to cost him position. And position to me means submission.
Lou, let's get to some picks that I know that you already have in the bankroll for Saturday night in Brazil. One of them on the main card, Rodolfo Vieira, going to take on Armen Petrosyan. And this is a pretty tightly lined fight here. Are you going to go with the non-Brazilian here and look to Petrosyan possibly to get his arm raised?
That's exactly what I'm going to do, Dave. And I like it because though Petrosyan is relatively singularly dimensioned in that he's a Muay Thai striker and struggles on the ground, I like who he's been in with. I like the results and the way I've seen him fight. And the one thing I do believe in him is his conditioning and his preparedness. On the other side, clearly Vieira is going to be prepared to fight in front of the home countrymen. So he's going to be ready to go, but he struggles mightily with gas, and he's going to be on fire for the first round. If we can get our boy Armen to get this into the second round, I think the fight really begins to turn towards his favor. I believe he's the larger man. That equates to takedown defense, and I think the Brazilian's going to have a hard time penetrating the Muay Thai striking of Petrosyan.
And you mentioned it there, if he can hold up, and whether that storm, the over right now, juiced to the over of 2.5 rounds here, plus $1.40. But again, maybe the tide starts to turn in that second round, Lou, with your handicap there. So maybe look for those live wagering spots here if Vieira comes out like a house on fire like he normally does. I want to get to the very first fight on the card, because, boy, it's always nice when you can get to any card and get that winner right out of the gate. And Mark Diakese is going to take on Fernandez here, Cali Fernandez. What do you make of Mark in this spot? Because I'm trying to see the numbers here again on this one right now. Diakese is small favorite, not anything out of pocket here at minus $1.42. Do you think he should be the favorite there?
Dave, I think he should be. He has a wealth of experience. If you look at his fights, you've seen some 2 losses in his last 2 fights, but look at who they were against. Diakese's extremely athletic. He's extremely skilled. I think he's a dog backed into a corner, and they're giving him a a fighter that's debuting that really comes in from Shuto, Brazil, has skill, but I think this has PhD in MMA written all over it. I think Diakese has too much experience, too much athleticism, and more important, and when we get to the fighting, too much wrestling. I think this is a great spot for Diakese, who opened 190 minus 195. There's some money come in on the Brazilian, which is just fine. I'll wait as long as I can and watch that number go as low as it'll go before I pounce on Diakese. I believe he has advantage in this fight.
Very quickly, I know you don't want to lay a huge favorite, so a lot of times you got Rinat Fakhretdinov here, a massive favorite against Dos Santos in this spot. He's minus 360 here. Is there another way that you want to try to attack this, or maybe look to a two-way parlay at some point?
Yes, I really, I'd like to have parlayed into him previously, which I've done. But if you look at this card and you look at specifically on the main event, there's some heavy chalk. I would say if you took him with the taller of the Bonfils, which is Gabriel Bonfim, perhaps to Rinat, for lack of being able to pronounce his last name. That may be a way to go, but I'm very convinced that Rinat wins this fight against a guy in Elysia Dos Santos that's skilled, but he's well older. He's at the edge of his fighting career and really needs to strike lightning to beat this Russian vice grip.
Yeah, Fakhretdinov doesn't roll off the tongue. Very quickly, 20 seconds to go. Tell the people about the sneak peek that you have in the About Business podcast.
We're doing a quick 10-minute opening line report every Monday. Check Gamblu.com for details. Thanks so much for having me on, Dave.
Always enjoy the conversation, and I hope you enjoyed the World Series, Lou. We heard you were there. When we come back, going to Chicago, catch up with Jordan Sherwood next. Do not forget, on DraftKings Sportsbook this week, new customers can bet just $5, pocket $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, all customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every single day. Download the app, use the promo code VSiN when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown, kids. It's all yours. Let's go out to the great city of Chicago, where we are joined each and every week by Jordan Sherwood. You can follow him on X, at Wood on ESPN 1000. Jordan, how is summer in Chicago going?
It is snowing.
Snowing!
It has started to snow on Halloween as we're recording this. Yeah, it's awful. It was 70 last week. Feel terrible, but yes, winter is here. Not coming. Winter is here.
I don't miss that. Let's get to this fight card down in Brazil, Jordan. And again, just had Lou Finocchiaro on. I think you guys are in unison. Very first fight of the day to get this thing started. Small favorite here, Mark Diakese. Do you think he should be a much bigger favorite?
I think he's right in line with where he should be. Maybe you slightly favor him a little bit more based on his experience, based on the wrestling that he's going to be able to kind of like rely on if it needs to be. And I think it's recency bias too. Obviously, he took a pretty difficult loss and hasn't looked great. But I think that's where he's got the advantage. That Fernandez's boxing is not as strong as I think maybe people would agree. And I think Diakese could match him on the feet. And then, as this fight gets to the ground or gets into the later rounds, we question Fernandez's gas tank. I don't know if it's as good as people think it is, because prior to his last couple of wins, which have been inside the distance very early in his regional fights, it's a guy that has struggled into the later rounds. Casey's been there before. He's been there with some of the best that the UFC has to offer. So I like him right now where he is at like that $1.60 price. I see advantages on the feet, a clear advantage on the ground and via experience. So you might as well grab him, I think, before the public recognizes that and that value, at least on him currently, goes down.
Yeah, and right now still even down at $1.42 that we're seeing here in DraftKings. So pretty good value today. But of course, once they see this, Jordan, they're going to run to the window and start betting on Mark Diakese, and that number is going to go up. Also on the undercard, whenever you have Overkill Hill, Angela Hill, on the card, she's going to take on Denise Gomes here. You only like this if Angela Hill potentially is a dog. Right now, she's a small dog at plus $1.05. What is that handicap for you? It's like there's value there if you're getting plus money on Angela Hill.
There is, and maybe you could argue that if it's a straight up, pick 'em. I like Angela Hill as well. The issue that obviously with Gomes is that she's got power, and she's obviously been a spark plug. She's showcased that her last couple of appearances inside the UFC after kind of flailing a little bit in her UFC debut. Angela Hill's been in there with the who's who in women's mixed martial arts. We know what Angela Hill does. She strikes with volume. She's got very good cardio and is going to, and could get into a dogfight if you need to be. I think the issue that maybe the concern that people have is that she got, beat up pretty bad in her last couple of fights. But here's the thing, like, she's not a fighter that gets stopped and not a fighter that gets knocked out. She's, elusive enough in her striking, and fights smart, fights out of danger. So I think, like, look, you certainly have confidence that she could go toe to toe and last the 3 rounds. Can she win the fight? Can she score those significant strikes as we get into rounds 2 or 3? I think that's where the question you have to ask. I don't think this fight's going to the ground in any way, shape, or form. So for me, a fighter that's been there, done that, I've seen her go 3 rounds, I've seen her go 5 rounds, and I've seen her never get knocked out. I like her against a fighter that probably getting a little bit more momentum because of how she's performed with those early stoppages and the power that she has, but I don't have confidence that Gomes could go into the later round.
All right, so again, via decision for Angela Hill, really not that big a difference. Would you nibble at that at plus $1.25 for Hill via decision, or just take the plus money at plus $1.05 in case she does catch Denise with something?
I don't think that we're going to see that from Angela Hill. I mean, certainly she's a well-versed fighter, but I like I'm picking up what you're putting down. The decision prop is certainly probably a little bit more value. That's how Angela Hill wins fights. That's how she likely would win this fight if you're on the Hill side. So I like that via decision, just to add a little bit more value to the Angela Hill side of things.
Yeah, there it is. Plus $1.25. I'm with you. I think that's the way to go if you're going to be on the Angela Hill side. Let's get to the co-main event here, because I can't believe this. When you look at Gabriel Bonfim, massive favorite over Nicholas Dalby, do we have a live dog scenario for the guy that's 12 years, the senior of the young undefeated fighter in Bonfim?
Yeah, there is. And here's the reason that I believe that. Yes, Bonfim looks like a phenom, 15-0, all of his, win streaks and all the submissions that he's had. But he hasn't shown me yet that he could, win a fight and win it striking. He's got to get the fight to the ground and look for a submission. B, Nicholas Dalby in his 27 mixed martial arts fights, never been submitted, very good takedown defense, and a guy that's like, he's seen a lot. He's seen a lot in the regional scene and obviously a couple of stints now in the UFC, plus the fact he's won 3 fights in a row. And, I think, again, probably Bonfim's the right side to be on. If you could find a value in a submission prop, good for you. But he's way till a favorite. I don't buy the Brazilian, home crowd being a factor. Dalby's been everywhere in his mixed martial arts career. So a guy that's going to, I think, have an advantage on the feet, is as tough as nails, and a guy that's never been submitted and has been in there with some very good grapplers, probably set skill for skill with Bonfim. If I'm on any side, straight up money line, I'm on the Dalby side because I've seen him cash before as an underdog.
So you're not concerned, potentially 3-round fight, that if it goes to the cards, he doesn't get a favorable decision being in Brazil?
Oh, no, come on. We could replay all these episodes. We know how the judging in Brazil goes. I mean, we could even talk about Abu Dhabi last week as well. So, yeah, I'm very big concern if it goes there. But certainly, look, if you got Bonfim trying to get takedowns, Dalby's keeping on the feet, scoring a little bit, who knows what could happen? The look at it is like, I just don't think he's not a $6 favorite, and I don't think there's going to be value with him via submission. So Dalby has to be the side for me.
Let's talk about the other Bonfim in here. Another big favorite, not as big as we see there with Gabriel, but he's going to be taking on from hell Vince Pichel. Mom's not going to like that nickname. I love it. It's one of the best in MMA. But again, we've got a lot of this, right? Where the Bonfims, they're taking on these older guys that have kind of been there, done that, like a Vince Pichel has. And you look at Vince here in that mustache, plus 380 against Ismail, who's minus $5. Is both Bonfils, again, just overvalued in your estimation?
I do. I think, yeah, and Bonfim, he looked great, when he was in Brazil last against Terrence McKinney, survived that first round, knocked him out in the second round, but then step up in competition. Benet Saint Denis, he put him out of there rather quickly. Pichel's going to give him the fight that he wants, a stand-up fight. I think that, certainly he's well-versed, could get this fight to the ground, has strong cardio. And I ask this, I just don't think that Bonfim, the 5 fights that Pichel has just had in a row, Madsen, Hubbard, Miller, Roosevelt Roberts, Gregor Gillespie, he went 3-2 those fights. I'm not sure Bonfim goes better than that, to be honest with you. So I think the level of competition, the fact that Pichel's going to, not a guy that I think is going to be threatened by Bonfim's striking, again, worth a heavy look. And I understand that there's a risk. There's a risk, obviously, with a lot of these Brazilian fighters being on the card. You alluded to it earlier, questioning the judging scorecards. But I think with Pichel and Dalby, it's no disrespect to the Bonfim family, probably not going to get invited to any Thanksgiving dinners at their house. But I think both dogs are the side here just because it's stylistic matchup, the veteran. I'm not holding a lot of water of the age gap. And I think, particularly in this case, Pichel's going to give Bonfim the fight that he wants. And I don't think Pichel's going to be threatened in any way, shape, or form.
All right, Britton Hess does a great job producing this show. He gives me a rundown every week. And in this one, it just says, Almeida via violence. That's your official call in the main event. Could you please explain yourself, sir?
Well, look, we love Derrick Lewis. We love the Black Beast. Credit to credit where it's due for taking this fight on short notice. Gives him an opportunity to come right back into discussion in the heavyweight division. But I think Jailton Almeida's special. I think there's a reason why he's showcasing and headlining this card. And we know Lewis just terrible off of his back, really can't get up. I think Almeida only needs one takedown to get the fight where he wants it and get a quick submission. So as long as Almeida, avoids that overhand right from Lewis, this fight's going to be a wash. So maybe it's not like it's violence, but I can't text Britton Almeida on the money line. That's not sexy or anything like that. So it's Almeida inside the distance, probably in round 1 via submission. So let's just call it violence because we're recording this again on Halloween.
If there was a prop for Almeida via violence, I would play it, Jordan, just in your honor. Only have about 30 seconds to go. Unnamed MMA podcast in Chicago. Don't know if you've mentioned it at all. Have you already thought about what this heavyweight matchup's going to look like at UFC 295 now that it's a replacement interim title?
Yeah, I like Sergey Pavlovich on the money line. I still don't trust, Tom Aspinall off of his ACL. He looked great, obviously, against Tybura, in his return. But Pavlovich is a different beast. So I think at the money line plus money right now, he's worth a look.
We're going to talk a lot about that in the coming week. When we come back, going to Boston next with Dan Vreeland on First Strike. Start your morning with VSiN's newest podcast, VSiN Daily Morning Bets. Josh Applebaum gives you every piece of info you need to be ready for betting the day's biggest games in just 15 minutes. He discusses line movements, injuries, and what you need to be looking at before you make those wagers. So make VSiN Daily Morning Bets part of your podcast and part of your morning routine. Download, subscribe wherever you get said pods. A man who knows all about podcasts is the one and only Dan Vreeland up in Boston. You can follow him on X, as I do, at Gumby Vreeland. And Dan, before I get to the question I love to start off everything with, I'm sure on your plethora of pods and platforms here in the MMA space, we had a week off, but did we? Because UFC 295 just got all blown up, just like UFC 294 got blown up. What do you make of the changes? And I wonder if you ever think we'll see John Jones and Stipe Miocic ever in some sort of quasi-heavyweight championship match in 2024.
I mean, I don't know if we will or we won't, but I will say that I think the withdrawal is actually good for business. While like at the end of the day, John Jones and Stipe is probably going to sell much better. I don't think anybody out there was trying to fool themselves that those are the two best heavyweights in the world. And like the fact that when John Jones fell out, that Stipe didn't stay in the matchup. I mean, that's further proof that that was not the right contender for the number one contendership. He's just the right guy for John Jones to like ride off into the sunset having beaten. So like it was a fun money match, but at the end of the day, Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich is infinitely more compelling to me.
Excellent take. I think you're right on. And I know we're not calling you casuals out there, but for those that don't exactly consume it like we might consume it, it is a better heavyweight matchup, albeit for the interim championship now as the co-main event for UFC 295. Okay, let's get to this fight card down in Brazil, Dan. You know I'm going to ask you this, and I love to ask you it each and every week. Your favorite fight to watch and your favorite fight to wager on.
So my favorite fight to watch is going to be the co-main event, Nicolas Dalby versus Gabriel Bonfim. I am mostly just excited to see Bonfim get a step up in competition. I've been a big Gabriel Bonfim fan since he was on the regional scene. I think he's got tons of potential, and giving him a guy who likes to stand in his face and throw bombs in Nicolas Dalby and has a high output and is going to take the best out of him. I really like what that's going to do, and hopefully he rises to the occasion. The fight that I'm most excited to bet on, this one's super easy. Angela Hill is plus money, and I can't believe Angela Hill is plus money against Denise Gomes. I know people are super hyped on Denise Gomes after she scored some sweet knockouts, and she did look really good in those knockouts. She knocked out Bruno Brazil, somebody who I'm super high on. But the fact of the matter is, first of all, Angela Hill, damn near impossible to knock out, not particularly hard to hit. And we're talking about Denise Gomes, somebody who got outpointed by Loma Lookboonmee, who is a much smaller, less physical fighter than Angela Hill only a few fights ago, right? Like Denise Gomes did not start her UFC career, just throwing haymakers and knocking people out. So she started with having a tough time for 15 minutes with Loma. So if you're telling me she can't outpoint Loma Lookboonmee if she's only the knockout power, I don't think she's going to get the knockout on Angela Hill. And the fact that you can get, plus 105 on Angela Hill right now, man, that's a steal to me.
Let me ask you this, though, Dan, because I do, and I'm always, look, when you have a fight card in Brazil, you wonder if it does hit the judges' scorecards. Here we go again, right? You can get Angela Hill plus $1.25 to win via decision here. Does that worry you at all? Because sometimes I say, man, we got to remember, and I know we do in the betting market, where these fights are taking place when we go to a fighter that we believe more than likely is going to hit the cards.
Yeah, I would say I worry a little bit about her being in Brazil. I also just worry a little bit about her being Angela Hill because she seems plagued by having split decisions for her entire career. I know sometimes the props come out a little bit later in the week and they're probably not out yet, but taking either side via split decision would probably be a sweet play because I would imagine Angela Hill could dominate this fight for 3 rounds and a Brazilian judge could still give one of them to Denise Gomes. So I'd say either of them by split, but I would also just say in general, like, I think Angela Hill is going to outpoint her in a severe enough fashion that we don't have to worry about the judges messing this up too bad.
And let's get to the fight you can't wait to watch. And Nicolas Dalby, a massive underdog here in the co-main event against Gabriel Bonfim, as you alluded to here, well over $4, plus 440 at some places. Bonfim still undefeated. You got to lay 6-1 if you want to back the Brazilian here. We know that Dalby's going to he's an exciting fighter to watch, certainly in a firefight. What style of fight? Is it going to be just bombs away here for 3 rounds?
I kind of hope that what this does is it forces Gabriel Bonfim to like throw for a little bit and then realize, like maybe some of the better parts of his game are his grappling because, like I said, he can stand and trade with a lot of people. I've had faith in him standing and trading with a lot of people for a long time. But the smarter play here is to get Dalby grappling and to get Dalby tired and to look for those submissions. I would like to see him do a little bit of that. I think he's a little bit unpredictable, which is probably the thing that makes him the most exciting. But if I was looking for a way to make that negative 600 look a little bit nicer, I'd probably just play it safe and stay inside the distance or play on the unders because, I think this fight is going to end before the bell. I don't think Dalby is going to survive 3 rounds with him. I do just think he's able to mix it up well enough that, it worries me a little bit. So that under 1.5 at plus money looks pretty good there. Or the over is on plus money. So the under is, just barely juiced a little bit, but then I would probably look for the inside the distance prop.
Let's get to the other Bonfim brother in this one, and Ismail Bonfim. I think Gabriel's looked at as maybe the better, longer prospect as their careers go, but he's also a sizable favor against Fromhel Vince Pichel here in this matchup. Again, it's very similar to the co-main. We got a younger, the Bonfim brothers, much younger, 27, against a guy now at 40 in Pichel. What do you make of this matchup here?
I love the line on Pichel. I think Vince Pichel is a really smart underdog play here. Now, if you told me gun to your head, pick the winner of this fight, I'm probably still leaning with Ishmael, but only ever so slightly. I think he's getting juiced up way too high, mostly just because he's Gabriel's brother. But we saw what happened to him in his last fight. He got beat by a guy who can wrestle. What is one thing we know Vince Pichel can do? Wrestle and not get tired. And if you look at Vince Pichel's losses, you can pretty much go right down the list. In all of his losses, he's losing two guys who can out-wrestle him. I don't think that's true of Ishmael Bonfim. I don't think he's got the wrestling of a Gregor Gillespie or the arm triangle even of a Gregor Gillespie. Those are the people out there beating Vince Pichel. I don't think that's Ishmael.
I want to get to a fight that I haven't discussed yet in the program. It's Caio Borralho against Abus Magomedov here. Magomedov over a $2 betting underdog. We know about Borralho and kind of where I think he could go in this marketplace, right? Very marketable fighter. I know they'd love him to shine in this middleweight bout. Is there danger lurking against Abus in this fight?
So I think there's obviously danger in the power, right? Abus Magomedov, in his very first fight, comes out, gets that insanely fast knockout, then goes and fights Sean Strickland. So we've got this wide level of variation on him, right? It's we know when he fights, I'm not going to say bumps, but when he fights the lower level fighters in the UFC, right? He has no problem and can knock them out in 10 seconds. When he fights the middleweight champion of the world, he can't deal with that pressure. He can't deal with that pace. He can't deal with that cardio. And so it's hard to say what happens in between there, right? Because Caio Borralho is somewhere in between the worst and the best in the division. I tend to think he's closer to the best, and I think he's a bad matchup for Magomedov because, first of all, he brings that grappling and that wrestling that has boded really well for him so far in the UFC. And Magomedov showed in his last fight, pace, somebody being in your face, tires him out. I also think we just haven't really seen Caio Borralho tagged by anybody. And granted, the level of his competition definitely lower than Abus Magomedov as well. But he's safe when it comes to his wrestling. He's safe when it comes to his striking. He does things that are not particularly risky. So I think we're going to see this fight on the mat pretty early. And even if not on the mat, up against the cage enough that Abus is going to have a lot of trouble with the cardio in the second and third round.
Yeah, that fight against Strickland, what an eye-opener, because Magomedov, if memory serves, was a small favorite in that fight, and boy, he did not look ready at all for the likes of Sean Strickland. It's going to be interesting, again, in Brazil against Caio Borralho. Let's get to the main event. Derrick Lewis, he's not scared of anybody. We know that. The beast is ready to roll at all times. Cardio might be another issue. Now you got a guy in Jailton Almeida, and my goodness, you don't want the fight to hit the ground. If it does, it just feels like it's over. Lewis has been in there with guys like that before. The Curtis Blades fight comes to mind. Can he do what he did against Blades and stuff enough and then find that uppercut that ended that night early? Is there a puncher's chance for the Black Beast?
I think he's got to get it on the first shot. And the problem with the first shot against Jailton Almeida is it's usually only 10 seconds away. If you look at how long it took him to shoot a takedown in each of his first, I think we're 5 or 6 fights now into his UFC career, the longest time it has ever taken him to shoot a takedown is 14 seconds.
Wow.
And so if you think that Derrick Lewis is going to stuff a lot of takedowns, he might get a little bit more time. But those attempts are coming right away. Jailton is not shy about what he likes to do. Now, that, of course, could mean that he's a little bit on the predictable side for, Derrick Lewis to try to time one of those. But I really think we're going to see Jailton hit that takedown. His top control is really good. I think you're going to see him get an arm triangle, within the first minute and a half of this fight.
20 seconds to go. Tell the people where they can find you. All the areas.
Yeah, check me out on the Top Turtle MMA podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, both in writing and their MMA podcast.
Dan, appreciate you as always, my friend. Cash some tickets. We'll catch up again next week. Going to Washington, D.C. next with Reed Kuhn when you come back with us right here on First Strike. We continue this edition of First Strike by going to the nation's capital, and we are joined once again by Reed Kuhn, the author of the book Fightnomics. You can follow him on X at the same title, at Fightnomics. Reed, I like to do this every so often. And by the way, shirt of the year candidate there. Dad to the bone. Pretty awesome for Halloween here as we record this on a Tuesday. I want to ask, for those that are new to our show, right, and they might not know Fightnomics and what the whole concept is behind it, could you just kind of explain to the newer viewers that we have exactly how this was done, the data-driven base that you've created for the UFC and MMA?
Yeah, well, the numbers came along a little over a decade ago and actually started quantifying everything that happens in a fight, both from a discrete point of view, like how many times was a strike thrown, how many takedowns were attempted, but also in terms of time and position. So you're measuring who's on top, how long did they stay there, did they try a submission, what are they doing on the ground, what are they doing in the clinch, who's in control, who's up against the fence. So the benefit of having all this data is that we now understand what is normal, what is unusual, what is the average by weight class. And then we can zero in very quickly and say, hey, this guy is clearly good in this way, or he is deficient in this other way. And that allows us to identify some of those openings and opportunities offensively and defensively.
Love it. It's great stuff. And we appreciate your insights each and every week. When you get to the main event, you've got a guy in Jailton Almeida who was a light heavyweight. We've discussed this many times through the years now about this. And then you go up to heavyweight, and it looks like a seamless transition here so far for Almeida, right? So he's going to be much lighter than his opponent here in the Black Beast and Derrick Lewis. Lewis pushing about 264. He's got to cut to make the weight sometimes. Almeida's kind of that blown-up light heavyweight. What are the data points showing you here? Should Almeida be as big a favorite as he is? And right now, Reed, that's a $5 betting favorite.
Yeah, so this is like the ultimate striker versus grappler in a sloppy heavyweight sense. We've seen this type of matchup many times, and it's hard to pick who's going to have the advantage strategically. But Derrick Lewis obviously only has a chance if he is able to throw some leather or some knees. Either way, he needs to be standing, whereas Almeida is finishing everyone on the mat in short order. And so his actual stats look extreme, not believable in the long run, but with only 25 minutes of, not even 25 minutes of fight time so far in the UFC, he keeps finishing people too quickly to amass much data. Derrick Lewis has been around forever, and even some of his fights will get out of the first round. But they back up what we're saying. They back up that Lewis is definitely the striking threat. Almeida doesn't even really use striking offensively. He uses it almost as a distraction just to set up the takedown. The guy only spends 4 seconds out of each round standing at a distance with an opponent. That means he wastes no time at all closing the distance, even if it's to get you up against the fence and eventually get you down, or to shoot for that takedown. So these are extreme metrics that you don't normally see, but they paint the picture of this fight will be interesting as long as they are staring at each other from a distance. As soon as it gets to the ground, I believe this will be over. And yes, Almeida should be a heavy favorite. He should be the one getting the finish on the ground. He just can't make a mistake like Marcos Rogerio de Lima did against Lewis just in that last fight.
Well, there you go. That was the flying knee for everybody that was on the de Lima side, and Lewis was the big underdog that cashed that night as he came in. And Lewis said after the fight, it wasn't like a trick or a plan. It just kind of happened, and then all of a sudden, boom, there goes that flying switch kick, and switches to the right knee, and a knockout happens there. So barring something like that, and again, I go back to the Curtis Blades fight, where he was able to stuff those takedowns a little bit to have the time to be able to get that uppercut off. The books aren't even giving you that big of an advantage. It's only 4-1 for Lewis to win via KO. It's plus 370 overall. So I think even the books realize he's only got one shot, and that shot is a lucky, I don't want to call it lucky like de Lima, but something in that manner.
Yeah, they know what we're seeing in the numbers and what we're seeing when we watch the highlight reel. That's the only way Lewis wins here. He could still do it. I mean, it's not a non-zero probability. You're talking like 1 in 5. But I think you might get slightly better value if you just take Almeida in the first round. I think that would be my best possible play. Otherwise, there's a lot of parlay, fodder to choose here. Fight does not go the distance, under 1.5. Almeida to win overall. I'll have to see where the props come in because not all of them have been released in my market yet, and so I haven't been looking at them that closely. But Almeida round 1 or Almeida by submission might be the only way to make this affordable.
Minus submission by submission rather is minus $10 right now. The under, by the way, is juiced heavily to your point, Reed. You still have to lay over $3 here if you want to play the under a round and a half in that potential 5-round matchup. By the way, if you really think somehow we're going to see zombie apocalypse and we go all 5, 14-1 is what you get without picking a winner that this fight goes the distance. I don't see that happening. Crazier things have happened, but that would be crazy. Let's get to some of the fights that you like on this card that you've already seen. Maybe there's some value there. Rinat Fakhretdinov is a rather sizable favorite here, minus 360 against Zaleski Dos Santos. And right now, Dos Santos plus 285, we're seeing on the comeback. Are the numbers backing Fakhretdinov here as that big sizable favorite?
They are. And like Almeida, we have a guy with very limited sample size, but his numbers are extremely impressive. So both striking and grappling, Rinat is a monster. He is knocking people down. He's landing with great accuracy. He has excellent defense when he's on the feet. And then he has a very aggressive ground game where he's been essentially flawless on the ground in terms of controlling people and getting them down. So to me, I look at this, that's a limited resume. So clearly he's been very successful in those few fights so far. But Dos Santos, I got to stack him up and say, can he compete with someone truly talented? And I think he has a better resume. He did lose some time due to PEDs and he came off suspension. So that's a red flag of, are some of his metrics from back then really believable? Because he actually does have a pretty good fight roster in terms of people he's beaten. But he does have liabilities. He's not as technical a striker. He's a little bit sloppier. He's not as accurate, doesn't have good defense. He's been dropped 5 times. That's a big liability against someone who's very aggressive in their striking. And his ground game is not particularly impressive. Only 37% of his time is actually in ground control. So, an aggressive wrestler is going to be able to take him down and hold him there. So I just see a lot of angles to victory for Rinat. The line, based on the sample size of stats, I think my models are kind of baking that in. It's saying urge a little bit of caution because this is not a lot of data to work with, but it is clearly favorable. So I do agree with him as a big favorite. Probably not enough to lay juice. I might be looking for another prop angle, like with Almeida, of a finish, or just using this guy as yet another parlay leg on a few of these chalky matchups.
In real time, I'm watching and my screen starts to flash a little bit on the Rodrigo Nascimento-Dontel Mays fight. And Mays right now is plus $1.54, Nascimento minus $1.85. Do you think there might be some value on the Mays side here that the data's showing?
Yeah, I see this as a lot of back and forth when I was looking at this between these heavyweights. One of them is a little bit better in one area and the other one complements it. Not a ton of ground action. I think Nascimento is clearly the more likely guy to get ground control, and that's a concern, especially down in Brazil. You don't want Mays just being a heavyweight lying on his back like a beached whale, doesn't know what to do. But on the feet, listen, Mays is dangerous, and he could drop Nascimento. Nascimento doesn't have any knockdowns to his credit. He's been dropped twice. And in terms of head strike avoidance, power strikes, what is your power strike defense? Nascimento is the worst fighter, arguably, on this entire card with a decent sample size. So he's getting hit a lot. And if you give Mays a few strikes, clean shots, I think he can hurt someone. And so at plus money, if you're getting plus 150, plus 160 even, maybe even a knockout prop at an even higher price, I think there's some value there. And I'm gonna be looking at some of those prop angles and see where the price lands, because I do think there's upset potential here.
Yeah, went from plus $1.60 to plus $1.54 in the manner of during the time of our conversation. So they're picking up what you're putting down, and your numbers are showing there. Conversely, Angela Hill, he's small underdog right now, just over. We're seeing about plus $1.05 right now. In her matchup here, normally that seems to be a green light go sign. Is the data backing Angela Hill, even though she's got to go on the road here and fight Gomes in Brazil?
Yeah, yet another prospect in Gomes, very limited sample size, but so far she has looked pretty clean. She does have much more aggressive wrestling, and so that's a concern. Hill has not spent a lot of time in control. She used to be more of that like Muay Thai straight up striker, and so that's a bit of a liability. But when I see, first of all, there's a 15-year age gap between these two fighters, that is one of the most extreme in UFC history. Again, that is a red flag. But for a fighter like Hill, who's a veteran, generally has crafty defense and tries to stay out of trouble, I think she can hold her own. I think when I see upset potential or someone who's not quite should be as big an underdog as she is, I'm leaning towards the over. I think Hill finds a way to stretch this fight. Even though Gomez looks more impressive on paper, I'm not sure I believe those metrics yet.
Great stuff, as always, from Reed Kuhn. Cash some tickets. We'll see you next week right back here. First Strike on VSiN.